Hi everyone, welcome. The bin that I've got here is my so-called bin of mixed worms, or the mixed red worms. It's just a combination of different types of red worms that live well together. It's thought to be a mixture of red wigglers, Indian blue worms, and European night crawlers. Last time we were in here, we left this piece of coffee filter here as an indicator to show us where we last fed. And no surprise, we've still got a good number of springtails hanging out in here. Nothing we've done so far has really worked on reducing their numbers. So I've almost kind of gotten to the point where I'm just accepting the fact that they're here. There's a whole bunch of them right here on the coffee filter too. So now 11 days have passed since we last fed this bin, and we gave them stuff like melon. There were chunks of lettuce in here. And you can see the springtails are just going bananas over this material over here, all nice and damp, and evidently just right for not just the springtails, but for the worms too. It looks like the worms are out here in force too, so luckily the presence of the springtails doesn't seem to be putting the worms off from coming over to nibble on this stuff. Thank goodness. So, before we come in here with today's feeding, which is really just a whole bunch of leaves from some radishes and some paper towels and napkins and stuff that I need to compost away, I figured we would really quick inspect the other end of the bin. Since the system has had only these paper coverings for some time now, I just want to make sure things aren't drying out too much, because if they're starting to become perhaps a little bit too dry, we can always put on some sort of better protection to keep the moisture within the system. I guess drying was thought to be one possible remedy to reducing springtail numbers. But every time we would come back in here and start rummaging through this stuff that's been uncovered and left to dry, we still saw quite a number of springtails hanging out in this stuff. And I can still see them all over the place. All these little tiny white specks that you see, those are all springtails. Perhaps not quite in the numbers that we've seen in the past over on this side. Possibly due to the fact that the material is gradually drying a little bit. And I guess with the watermelon, lettuce, things like that that were placed into the feeding zone last time, maybe the springtails are in pursuit of the moisture the same way as the worms are. It is kind of nice to see fewer worms out on this edge of the bin. I guess in part because we've been trying to run this thing almost sort of like a continuous flow system or a wedge type system where only the opposite end gets fed, and we keep pushing the finished castings in this direction. So no feedings have been applied on this edge. No bedding's been applied, no nothing. It's just castings. And they look really nice. They're a little bit clumpy here and there, but for the most part they flow pretty good. Definitely seeing a much reduced number of springtails in the material too, which is kind of nice. I guess I've been wondering if there might be an opportunity someday to just start scooping material out of this edge. Just some castings that could already be put right to use, maybe, I don't know. I still see worms hanging out in this stuff, so I guess I would probably want to see that this stuff's been evacuated a little bit better. But every time I pull up a handful, I always spot a worm or two in it. But certainly not as many as we've seen in the past, so either the stuff is drying out, causing the worms to head over in the direction of the feeding zone where we've been adding, foods that bring with them some moisture. And we didn't really even cover up that much, but we did have that feeding zone indicator suppressing the loss of moisture to evaporation to a certain degree. And then the two layers of paper, the newspaper and then the paper bag on top. So I guess any of these large chunks of bedding I encounter along the way, I'll just try to move them over to where the work's being done so we can continue to try to treat this edge of the bin as mostly finished castings. And maybe even pile it up a little bit higher just so that we can give ourselves room enough on the other side to pile in today's food. I wasn't really planning on bringing any extra bedding into the mix today. It looks to me like we've got enough. Well, I mean, there was those couple pieces of paper over there, but these pieces of shredded paper I think would be really nice to put down under the food. Nice seasoned material. It's been in the bin for who knows how long now. And let's see. Let's just do another quick till through here. Yeah, lots and lots of worms. All kind of mounding together. I guess the stuff they got last time in here, the melon and stuff like that. Not too surprising that they've come together for that stuff. Number of delicious pieces of like watermelon and cantaloupe melon, I believe. I guess I was just curious to see if we might encounter any leftovers of that stuff, but it seems unlikely after 11 days. So now this system's been in service for 318 days and has been fed 26 times. Today's feeding would register as feeding number 27. And let's see. I don't think there's a whole lot more to do. I guess it is nice to see that the material out on this end of the bin is starting to show a pretty significant reduction in the number of springtails that we're observing. It's just that they're overhanging out with the worms in the dampness where the food's been getting applied, which is not too much of a surprise. I just wonder what it would take to really finally see a significant reduction in these little guys. Ah, here's some leftovers. Some of the cantaloupe melon that they got last time. It was really just cantaloupe melon rinds and watermelon rinds with a little bit of the juicy melon remaining on them. Oh yeah, there was some frozen cherry tomatoes too that I'm seeing as leftovers too. So there is a little bit of leftover here and there, but certainly not much. I would say that they're due for a feeding. So let's try to get all this paper that we had placed down on that edge back over there. And maybe make a little bit of extra space into which we can drop these couple of paper towels as sort of the foundation onto which we can place today's delicious foods. This stuff was in the freezer. It's been out for a little while now, thawing. It doesn't have a whole lot of weight to it. It's not a lot of food, I would say. I think this stuff's going to go pretty quick. This stuff seems like the sort of food that the worms can probably nibble away quite rapidly, especially since it's been frozen and is now thawed. It's just become almost like mush. So I've got a feeling they're going to like that. Even because it's a little bit chilly because it's still cold, still partially frozen. And I'm almost wondering if it would be maybe a good idea to drop a little bit of fresh bedding in on top of this feeding area. Might as well. I think we could do that, right? It's right here behind me. I can just reach over and grab it, and we'll treat them to a handful or two. Some of my nice prepared bedding, which is also bringing with it a bit of moisture. I usually prepare this stuff with a good bit of dampness. But I don't think we need a whole lot. We'll just drop in a couple handfuls so we can see that portion of food that we gave them is covered up, and then that'll be it. Alrighty. So I guess it does seem like it helps a little bit to have that feeding zone indicator covering the food, or the feeding zone, because it did seem like the moisture level over on that end was quite high. Possibly also due to the types of foods that we placed in there for them. And I got a feeling that these leaves that we just plopped in here are probably going to bring with them a little bit of moisture too. Perhaps not as much as the watermelon or the cantaloupe melon did last time. But with these extra couple sheets of paper on top, this coffee filter covering things up, and then these 2 sheets of paper, I think we'll be pretty well protected from evaporation. Here too, I was tending to put this last sheet of paper more in the direction of the feeding zone, covering that area. Perhaps even leaving this end of the bin to get a little bit extra ventilation by not being as thickly covered with just 1 sheet of newspaper there. So that's our check-in now with the mixed red worms. I've got a few things I got to take care of getting cleaned up and put away. I'm not going to waste your time with that. Before I go really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.